The fate of the Chiss beyond Thrawn presents a fascinating and complex narrative in the Star Wars universe. The Chiss, a mysterious and intelligent species native to the unknown regions, have historically remained isolated from the larger galactic conflicts that have shaped much of the known galaxy. However, their prominence in the Star Wars saga was forever changed through the rise of Grand Admiral Thrawn, one of the most cunning tacticians in galactic history. Thrawn, a member of the Chiss species, was a towering figure within the Empire, known for his military genius and strategic brilliance. His leadership brought the Chiss out of their isolated existence and into the spotlight, shaping not only the galactic politics of the time, but also the future of the Chiss ascendancy. But what happens to the Chiss people after Thrawn's disappearance, and eventually his death, is a question that looms large in the aftermath of his final campaigns. Before Thrawn's rise to prominence, the Chiss were a species largely removed from the galactic stage, operating primarily within the confines of the unknown regions, a largely unexplored part of the galaxy. The Chiss ascendancy, their political system, is built on a strict hierarchy, emphasizing military discipline, strategic foresight, and an unyielding loyalty to the ascendancy's survival. This isolation was a strategic choice, as the Chiss had long recognized the dangers of galactic entanglements. They remained hidden from the greater galaxy, letting the events of galactic wars unfold without directly interfering until Thrawn's rise. Thrawn's actions, both in the Galactic Empire and in his efforts to secure the future of the Chiss, significantly impacted not only the Empire but the galaxy at large. After his disappearance and presumed death, the Chiss ascendancy once again faced a question of leadership, as well as a shift in their relationship with the galaxy's wider political factions. The Chiss ascendancy, a society in flux after Thrawn. The Chiss military is still formidable, with a long history of strategic innovation, but without Thrawn's leadership, they now face the possibility of internal factions seeking to take power. As the galactic power structures continue to evolve, particularly with the rise of the First Order and the re-emergence of the Sith, the Chiss may find themselves either forced into the larger galactic struggle or potentially manipulated by external forces. Palpatine's return and the power vacuum left by Thrawn could make the Chiss ascendancy a target for Sith influence, especially if Palpatine seeks to expand his empire and subjugate the unknown regions. The role of the Chiss in the galaxy beyond Thrawn. While Thrawn's legacy looms large in Chiss history, the future of the Chiss ascendancy is uncertain. Thrawn's strategic genius and his ability to navigate galactic politics made him a valuable asset to both the Empire and the galaxy's broader power struggles, but his absence leaves open the question of how the Chiss will interact with the post-Empire galaxy. With Palpatine's rise, the First Order's rise, and the Sith's return, the Chiss may find themselves drawn into galactic conflicts against their will. The key question is whether the Chiss ascendancy will choose to remain isolated, as they have historically done, or whether they will be forced to engage in galactic events, which could ultimately shape their fate. If the Chiss choose to engage in the galaxy's struggles, their tactical genius and strategic foresight could make them an important ally or a powerful foe for those who seek galactic dominance. The Sith, who view the dark side as a means to control the galaxy, may see the Chiss ascendancy as a valuable asset to exploit. Given the Chiss's military strength, intelligence networks, and knowledge of the unknown regions, they may find themselves used as pawns in a much larger galactic game. However, there is also the potential for the Chiss ascendancy to remain neutral, playing both sides while strategically keeping to the shadows. Their highly structured society, with its focus on internal unity and military discipline, allows them to maintain a level of autonomy that could enable them to avoid direct involvement in galactic wars. But as the Sith's power continues to grow, the Chiss may be forced to make a choice, either align with the galaxy's dominant powers or remain steadfast in their desire for independence. In the years following Thrawn's disappearance, the Chiss ascendancy might struggle with the question of leadership and internal cohesion. The lack of a single, unifying leader like Thrawn could lead to competition for the future of the Chissa people, potentially splitting the ascendancy into different factions, each with their own vision for the future. Some factions may seek to engage with the broader galaxy, while others might choose to maintain their seclusion, avoiding the reach of galactic powers like the First Order or Palpatine. Regardless of the path they choose, the Chissa will have to adapt to a galaxy that continues to shift and evolve in unpredictable ways. External threats to the Chiss ascendancy. The Chiss ascendancy, while largely hidden from the broader galaxy, is not without its own challenges. The unknown regions are a largely unexplored area of the galaxy, and the Chiss must contend with the many dangers that lie beyond their borders. Moreover, the First Order's expansion into the galaxy, combined with the Sith's long-standing goal of power, may put pressure on the Chiss ascendancy to either ally with the growing forces of the dark side or face the risk of total annihilation. With Thrawn's death, the Chiss no longer have a prominent leader capable of holding off these external threats, leaving them vulnerable to the manipulations of Palpatine and the First Order. The rise of the Sith could force the Chiss to choose between their loyalty to their own people and the potential for galactic survival by forming alliances. The future of the Chiss beyond Thrawn is full of uncertainty, but also potential. The Chiss ascendancy, with its rich history and strategic prowess, has the potential to play a critical role in the galaxy's future, whether as a dominant force, a neutral power, or a mysterious player who operates from the shadows. With Thrawn's absence, their path is no longer clear, but their ability to adapt to galactic shifts will ultimately define their future. As we move forward in exploring the fate of the Chiss beyond Thrawn, it's important to look at how their future might evolve, considering both their military capabilities and the external forces that could shape their path. While Thrawn's leadership and military genius provided the Chiss ascendancy with a clear direction, his absence leaves the Chiss in a position where their internal leadership, military doctrine, and interactions with the wider galaxy will be of paramount importance. This section explores the potential political changes and military shifts within the Chiss ascendancy, as well as how external threats, particularly the resurgence of the Sith, could force the Chiss people to make crucial decisions about their role in the galaxy. The Chiss ascendancy Sep's leadership crisis after Thrawn, Chiss, death. However, with his death, the Chiss face an internal struggle regarding who will take the mantle of leadership. Historically, the Chiss ascendancy has been governed by a council of leaders, with the most notable position being that of the ascendancy's ruler. But without a figure like Thrawn, capable of commanding both loyalty and respect, it's likely that rival factions within the Chiss military and political systems will emerge. Some may push for a more aggressive approach to expand their influence in the galaxy, while others may prefer to remain isolated, focusing solely on their own survival and maintaining their control over the unknown regions. A power struggle could very well ensue, with different factions within the Chiss military and political elite vying for dominance. These factions may have varying visions of how the Chiss ascendancy should interact with the wider galaxy. One faction may push for an alliance with the New Republic or its successors, while another may consider a partnership with the First Order or other galactic powers, given the need for resources and protection from growing external threats. The Chiss military doctrine, adapting without Thrawn. The Chiss military doctrine, one of the key elements that made Thrawn's leadership so effective, is deeply rooted in strategic thinking, long-term planning, and a careful balance of offense and defense. Under Thrawn's leadership, the Chiss military was known for its discipline, precision, and innovative tactics, all of which were carefully calculated to maintain the Ascendancy's independence while avoiding unnecessary conflict with galactic powers. The absence of Thrawn, however, poses a serious question. Can the Chiss military continue to operate at the same level of strategic genius without a leader capable of pulling off the kind of complex maneuvers Thrawn did? The loss of Thrawn could lead to a shift in the Chiss military strategy, where new leaders may attempt to assert their own approach. The military may grow more aggressive, taking a more interventionist stance to secure their interests in the galaxy, or they may double down on the Ascendancy's isolationist approach, focusing inward and reinforcing their borders. Both paths present significant challenges. On one hand, a more aggressive military expansion could invite conflict with the First Order, the Resistance, or even the Sith, leading the Chiss to become embroiled in galactic wars. On the other hand, if the Chiss Ascendancy retreats further into its seclusion, they risk becoming irrelevant in a galaxy that is increasingly shaped by the rise of new powers, like the First Order and the Sith Eternal. Another aspect to consider is the military capabilities of the Chiss themselves. Though they have been a largely secretive species, the Chiss military has long been recognized as one of the most formidable forces in the galaxy, especially in the unknown regions. They have access to cutting-edge technology, advanced weaponry, and strategic knowledge of the unknown regions, giving them an edge over many galactic powers. However, without Thrawn's guidance, the Chiss military might struggle to integrate their superior capabilities with the larger galactic context, potentially leading to missed opportunities or failures in negotiations with other galactic powers. The Chiss and galactic politics. The push for alliances. Another question that arises following Thrawn's death is how the Chiss will engage with the galaxy. Throughout the Star Wars saga, the Chiss have remained somewhat on the periphery of galactic politics, primarily due to their isolationist policies. However, the presence of new galactic powers, such as the First Order, Palpatine's Sith Eternal, and the Sith threat in the unknown regions, means that the Chiss may no longer have the luxury of remaining independent and neutral. The First Order, led by Kylo Ren in the sequel trilogy, presents a unique challenge for the Chiss Ascendancy. While the Chiss may view the First Order as a potential ally, due to their shared interests in maintaining order and control, their deep-rooted disdain for external control could lead to tension. The First Order, with its growing military might and interest in expanding its influence, may view the Chiss as a valuable ally, while the Chiss Ascendancy, wary of external manipulation, may be reluctant to enter into such an alliance unless it is on their terms. Similarly, the Resistance, representing the forces of freedom, may look to the Chiss as potential allies against the Sith and other rising dark side threats. However, the Chiss Ascendancy's insular policies may present a barrier to such a partnership. The Chiss have little interest in joining larger galactic movements unless there is a direct benefit to their people and territory. As such, they may prefer to maintain neutrality or form alliances that preserve their autonomy without becoming embroiled in galactic conflicts. Yet the Sith, with their ability to infiltrate and manipulate galactic powers, are the most immediate threat to the Chiss Ascendancy. The Sith Eternal. having grown in power after Palpatine's return, may seek to expand their influence into the unknown regions. The Chiss, with their advanced military capabilities and knowledge of the unknown regions, could become a critical element in the Sith's long-term plans. Palpatine's ultimate return demonstrates the pervasiveness of the Sith, and the Chiss may find themselves once again caught in the middle of the Sith's quest for control and the galactic forces that would seek to stop them. The future of the Chiss, isolation or intervention. The future of the Chiss ascendancy will largely depend on the strategic decisions made by their leaders in the wake of Thrawn's death. Will the Chisses continue their long-standing policy of isolation, watching from the shadows as the galaxy fights for control, or will they become active players in the greater galactic drama? There are significant risks and rewards associated with either path. The Chiss ascendancy's isolation has protected them for generations, allowing them to remain a hidden power with superior tactical minds and technology. However, the galaxy is changing, and it may no longer be possible for the Chisses to remain neutral in the face of growing Sith power, the influence of the First Order, and the return of Palpatine. As we continue to explore the fate of the Chiss beyond Thrawn, the focus must shift towards the Chisses' role in the broader galactic balance, particularly as they navigate the challenges of a galaxy that is ever-changing, filled with both internal conflicts and external threats. The Chiss ascendancy, while traditionally isolated from the wider galactic struggle, now faces the possibility of a significant shift in their involvement. The rise of the Sith, the resurgence of Palpatine, and the expansion of the First Order represent forces that could not be ignored by the Chiss, either through necessity or through strategic calculation. This section will explore how the Chiss may decide to interact with these rising powers and what their future might hold in this complex web of galactic politics. The Chiss ascendancy's response to the rise of Palpatine and the Sith. The return of Palpatine in the sequel trilogy represents a turning point not just for the galactic powers, but also for the Chiss ascendancy. While the Chiss have remained relatively isolated throughout the galaxy's conflicts, the Sith Eternal's return, along with Palpatine's resurrection, brings an external threat that the Chiss cannot ignore. Palpatine, with his vast knowledge of the dark side and his resurrection in the unknown regions, presents a complex and dangerous influence on the Chiss ascendancy. Given the Chiss's keen understanding of strategic defense and territorial integrity, their primary concern will likely be preserving their autonomy in the face of this external Sith power. If the Sith seek to expand their influence beyond the unknown regions, it's possible that the Chiss will be forced to defend their borders, either through diplomatic means or through military confrontation. Historically, the Chiss ascendancy has been cautious in its dealings with outside forces, preferring to remain largely undisturbed. However, as the Sith emerge as a growing threat, alliances or cooperation may be necessary for the Chiss to survive the looming dangers. Moreover, the Chiss military is one of the most highly trained and organized in the galaxy, making them a potentially formidable force against any Sith incursion. However, Palpatine's return and the resurrection of the Sith Eternal may force the Chiss to rethink their neutral stance and consider an alignment with other galactic powers, such as the Resistance or the New Republic, if for no other reason than to counter the rising Sith influence. The Chiss's decision to ally or not with these forces could drastically shape their future as a galactic entity. The unknown nature of Palpatine's power and the threats he poses to all systems in the galaxy could force the Chiss to step into galactic politics in ways they had never anticipated. The Chiss and the First Order, strategic alliances, or conflict. Moreover, The First Order's focus on totalitarian control could run counter to the Chiss Ascendancy's more structured, but still relatively independent, societal systems. The Chiss are not accustomed to the kind of brute force and destructive tactics employed by the First Order, and this could create friction between the two forces, especially if the Chiss are forced to cooperate with the First Order in any capacity. The Chiss and the Resistance, a strategic ally in the face of galactic uncertainty. In contrast to the First Order, the Resistance represents a very different set of values. While they share the Chiss's desire for freedom from tyrannical forces, the Resistance's political and military methods are far more disruptive and less methodical than those employed by the Chiss Ascendancy. The Resistance's commitment to galactic freedom and the defeat of the First Order presents the Chissas with an opportunity to form alliances based on shared goals, though their very different approaches to conflict make such an alliance complicated. The Chissas, with their deeply ingrained respect for order and control, may find the Sis's unstructured and at times desperate methods to be disconcerting, even if their goals align in principle. The Chiss Ascendancy, however, might still consider an alliance with the Resistance if the Sith and the First Order continue to pose a direct threat to their existence. The Resistance's role in galactic freedom, its opposition to both Palpatine and the First Order, could make them a strategic ally to the Chiss, especially if the Chiss see an opportunity to fight back against the growing Sith influence. However, the Chiss will likely demand that any alliance be based on mutual benefit and strategic necessity, not ideological alignment. As the Sith continue to assert their control over the galaxy, the Chiss Ascendancy's military and strategic expertise could make them a vital player in the galactic struggle. However, their independence will always be their top priority, and any alliances they form will be done with careful consideration. The Resistance, despite its commitment to galactic freedom, could face challenges in working with the Chiss, especially if the Chiss Ascendancy sees the galactic conflict as something that could destroy their autonomy. The Chiss beyond Thrawn, a new era of galactic power. In the end, the fate of the Chiss beyond Thrawn depends on how they respond to the evolving galactic landscape. As they face threats from the Sith, the First Order, and the changing dynamics of the galaxy, the Chiss Ascendancy must decide whether to remain isolated, form alliances, or even become an active participant in the galactic conflict. The rise of the Sith, the First Order's expansion, and the ongoing struggle for galactic power will force the Chiss Ascendancy to re-examine their place in the galaxy, and the legacy of Thrawn will weigh heavily on the decisions they make. Whether they choose isolation or engagement with the broader galaxy, the Chiss are poised to play a critical role in the galaxy's future. Their military expertise, strategic brilliance, and ability to adapt will ensure that the Chiss Ascendancy remains a powerful force, even without the presence of their greatest leader, Thrawn. The future of the Chiss will be shaped by their choices, and only time will tell whether they rise to become a dominant power or continue to operate from the shadows, preserving their independence while watching the galaxy around them burn. As we continue to explore the fate of the Chiss beyond Thrawn, it is crucial to examine the potential for Chiss expansion and the external threats they may face in the galaxy, particularly with the rising influence of both the First Order and the Sith. The Chiss Ascendancy, with its unique position in the unknown regions, could either remain isolated or play a more central role in galactic events. The Chiss Ascendancy SEP's potential for expansion. While the Chiss Ascendancy has historically remained isolated, the galactic conflict sparked by the rise of the Sith and the First Order could force the Chiss to reconsider their position. The unknown regions, while largely unexplored, are not devoid of potential threats or opportunities. The Chiss are known for their tactical brilliance and advanced military strategies, and as the galaxy's political landscape shifts, the Ascendancy could find itself drawn into galactic affairs, either by necessity or by choice. The Chiss Ascendancy's military has always been one of its greatest strengths. Known for its strategic foresight and methodical planning, the Chiss are highly skilled in warfare and possess a disciplined approach that has allowed them to maintain their autonomy in the face of galactic powers. However, Thrawn's death creates an uncertainty over the leadership of this military might. The absence of a central figurehead like Thrawn could lead to a fragmentation of the Chiss military, with various leaders vying for control. This power struggle could either result in the Chiss expanding their influence through force or continue their historical policy of isolation and avoidance of galactic politics. Given their advanced technology, military efficiency, and knowledge of the unknown regions, the Chiss are well positioned to expand into galactic politics if they so choose. The First Order and the Resistance, locked in their eternal struggle for control, may attempt to forge alliances with the Chiss, either to bolster their military capabilities or to secure strategic footholds in the unknown regions. This potential for alliances or intervention in galactic conflicts could push the Chiss to take a more active role, whether through formal partnerships or by taking matters into their own hands. The Chiss and the Sith. A dangerous proximity. One of the most pressing threats to the Chiss Ascendancy lies in the growing presence of the Sith in the galaxy. The Chiss, with their military might and tactical acumen, would be a valuable asset to the Sith, a powerful ally in Palpatine's quest to reclaim control over the galaxy. However, the Chiss have always valued independence, and the Sith's manipulative tendencies may not sit well with their highly disciplined society. The Chiss Ascendancy under Thrawn avoided entangling themselves in galactic politics, but the return of the Sith and their eventual presence in the unknown regions presents a more immediate threat. The question for the Chiss is whether they will cooperate with the Sith to ensure their survival, or whether they will resist the Sith's encroachment and face the consequences of a battle for their territory. The Sith, with their ability to manipulate the dark side and control the minds of others, might seek to subjugate the Chiss, either by force or by corrupting their leaders. The Chiss military, with its superior strategic foresight, might see the Sith's rise as a direct threat, leading to a potential conflict between the Chiss Ascendancy and the Sith Eternal. The First Order, a pragmatic ally, or a manipulative force. While the Sith may be an existential threat to the Chiss, the First Order could also pose a significant challenge. Led by Kylo Ren, the First Order seeks to reassert Imperial control over the galaxy, and their vision of order and subjugation may align with some of the Chiss Ascendancy's own values. The First Order is, like the Chiss, a militaristic regime with a focus on discipline, control, and order, making them a potential ally for the Chiss in their struggle to maintain independence in the galaxy. However, the First Order, unlike the Sith, is less focused on the dark side and more concerned with Imperial conquest. Their authoritarian nature could present a challenge for the Chiss, who value strategic planning over brute force. The First Order's expansionist nature might push the Chiss Ascendancy into a situation where they must decide between cooperation for mutual survival or resistance to avoid becoming another tool of the First Order's imperialism. The Chiss may choose to align with the First Order, seeing the First Order's rise as an opportunity to secure military support and territorial safety. On the other hand, The Chiss ascendancy could decide that the First Order's totalitarian approach to galactic governance is incompatible with their own values of self-preservation and autonomy. In this case, they may opt for independence, even if it means facing the full force of the First Order's ambitions. Regardless of the path they choose, the Chiss ascendancy will need to carefully weigh their options in dealing with the First Order, balancing their military strength with their need to maintain autonomy in a galaxy rapidly descending into chaos. The Resistance, an unlikely, yet important ally. The Resistance, though primarily a force of freedom fighters against the First Order, represents another potential avenue for the Chiss ascendancy to consider in their future. The Resistance shares many of the same ideals as the Chiss: independence, freedom, and the desire to preserve order. However, the Resistance's methods, while driven by good intentions, are far more unpredictable and disruptive than the Chiss would prefer. The Chiss ascendancy, known for its methodical and calculated military strategies, may find the Resistance's more improvised tactics difficult to align with. Nonetheless, the Resistance's fight against the First Order and the Sith makes them a potential ally for the Chiss. The Chiss may see the Resistance as a means to counterbalance the growing Sith influence in the galaxy, especially if the First Order proves to be a manipulative force that threatens their independence. The Chiss ascendancy, however, would likely only enter into an alliance with the Resistance if it serves their own strategic interests, likely focusing on military cooperation and mutual protection from First Order or Sith encroachment. In the wake of Thrawn's absence, the Chiss ascendancy faces significant challenges and opportunities that will shape its future. The galactic landscape is constantly changing, with forces like the First Order, the Resistance, and the growing influence of the Sith acting as powerful players in the ongoing struggle for control. For the Chiss, this shifting dynamic forces them to reconsider their long-standing policy of isolation, especially given the strategic importance of the unknown regions and the Chiss military's role in maintaining the stability of their territory. Internal power struggles and factionalism. The Chiss ascendancy is not without its internal tensions. Thrawn's death leaves a leadership vacuum that is likely to cause political fragmentation. The ascendancy's military and political spheres are tightly intertwined, and the Chiss's very structure encourages a focus on internal discipline, order, and strategic cohesion. Without a figure like Thrawn to provide direction, competing factions within the Chiss military and the political class may begin to vie for influence. While factionalism could lead to diplomatic instability, it may also result in the rise of a new leader, someone capable of uniting the Chiss under a singular cause. The next generation of Chiss leadership will likely face the challenge of not just maintaining military supremacy, but also ensuring that the ascendancy remains a force to be reckoned with in a galaxy torn apart by empire-building powers, rebellions, and the rise of new Sith lords. The Chiss ascendancy, SIP's military strength and strategic value. The Chiss military has long been a symbol of tactical brilliance and precision, and this strength is likely to remain a defining characteristic of the Chiss ascendancy, even in the post-Thrawn era. The Chiss Navy, with its advanced technologies and exceptional strategic planning, is capable of securing their territory and keeping potential invaders at bay. However, the galactic balance has shifted dramatically since Thrawn's death, and the Chiss military may find itself facing unprecedented threats. The Sith Eternal poses a significant threat to the Chiss ascendancy, as their dark side power and expansionist ambitions are likely to make them a dominant force in the galaxy. Palpatine, now back from the dead and entrenched in the unknown regions, has the potential to manipulate Chiss leaders or coerce them into alliances or submission. As Palpatine's Sith forces begin to expand, they could pose a serious military challenge to the Chiss. The Chiss Navy, despite its remarkable strength, may find itself ill-prepared for the supernatural forces wielded by the Sith. The Chiss military, known for its intellectual strength, may also struggle to deal with the dark side's unorthodox tactics, particularly if Palpatine's Sith begin to infiltrate the unknown regions in search of new territories to conquer. In order to confront the Sith, the Chiss will likely need to strengthen alliances, either with the Resistance or other galactic powers that stand in opposition to the Sith Eternal. This need for alliances could push the Chiss into more direct engagements with galactic forces, which may not be in line with their historical preference for strategic isolation. In any case, their military strength, coupled with the advanced technology they command, makes them a formidable opponent for any force, be it the Sith or the First Order. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Chiss Ascendancy's future is the unknown regions, a largely unexplored part of the galaxy that has been central to the Chiss's long-standing isolationism. The unknown regions remain a mystery to most galactic powers, and the Chiss Ascendancy has used this to their advantage, maintaining seclusion while carefully observing the events of the galaxy unfold. The Sith may seek to expand their influence into the unknown regions, taking advantage of the Chiss Ascendancy's strategic isolation to exploit resources or manipulate the Chiss into alliances or subjugation. The First Order, with its growing ambitions to control the galaxy, may also seek to explore and expand into the unknown regions, seeing them as a potential haven for military bases or new resources. The Chiss, while masters of defense and tactics, may find themselves caught off guard if they are forced to contend with external forces in their own backyard. The unknown regions are also home to mysterious and unseen forces, and the Chiss Ascendancy may have to confront threats from within the very regions they have spent so long avoiding. These unseen dangers, whether they are alien species, dark side forces, or other unexplored threats, could force the Chiss into conflict on multiple fronts. How the Chiss Ascendancy chooses to deal with these external and internal challenges will shape their future and the legacy of their people. The Chiss beyond Thrawn, a new role in a shifting galaxy. The Chiss Ascendancy, once a quiet and isolated entity within the galaxy, now stands at a crossroads. With Thrawn's death, the Chiss find themselves in a rapidly changing galaxy, one that is influenced by the return of the Sith, the First Order, and the growing conflict between dark side and light side forces. As the galaxy plunges into greater chaos, the Chiss Ascendancy must decide whether to remain in the shadows or step forward as a more active player in the galactic drama. The Chiss are a species defined by their intellectual brilliance and tactical superiority. But the post-Thrawn era demands more than just military might. It requires diplomacy, alliances, and the ability to adapt to an ever-changing political landscape. Whether the Chiss Ascendancy chooses to remain neutral, form alliances with the Resistance, or challenge the First Order and the Sith, the future of the Chiss in galactic events is uncertain. In the end, the fate of the Chiss Ascendancy will depend on the leaders who rise to guide them, the alliances they choose to form, and how they choose to respond to the growing threats from both external forces and internal strife. Will they become a pivotal power in the galaxy, or will they remain the shadowed observers they have always been, watching the galaxy's fate unfold before them? The Chiss Ascendancy's future is still uncertain, but their remarkable strategic minds and their rich history suggest that they will continue to play an important role in the galaxy's evolving story. As the Chiss ascendancy navigates the post-Thrawn galaxy, their actions will ultimately determine whether they continue to exist in isolation or rise as a significant player in galactic events. While their strategic brilliance and military expertise give them a unique advantage, the socio-political landscape of the galaxy has dramatically shifted. In addition to external threats like the First Order and the Sith Eternal, the Chiss must also contend with the changing dynamics of their own people, particularly in the absence of Thrawn, their greatest leader. Potential alliances: the Chiss and the new galactic powers. The Chiss ascendancy's future hinges on their decision to either remain isolated or engage with the galaxy's new power structures. As the galaxy faces both external and internal upheaval, alliances will play a critical role in shaping the Chiss's future. Two of the most prominent factions in the galaxy are the First Order and the Resistance, each with its own vision for the future. The Chiss and the First Order. The First Order is built on a foundation of militaristic control, order, and discipline, qualities that are not only familiar to the Chiss ascendancy, but align with the Chiss's own values. The First Order's vision of restoring control over the galaxy could be appealing to the Chiss if they view their independence as threatened by Sith influence or galactic instability. Given the Chiss military's prowess, there is a possibility that the First Order could view them as a strategic ally, an ally whose military capabilities could bolster the First Order's strength. However, the Chiss ascendancy's inherent independence may present a major obstacle to any potential alliance. The First Order, while seemingly aligned with the Chiss on the surface, is a totalitarian regime, one that seeks to control all aspects of galactic life. The Chiss are known for their self-sufficiency and control over their own destiny, which would likely put them at odds with a First Order that seeks absolute dominance. The First Order would likely see the Chiss as a useful asset to expand their military strength, but the Chiss ascendancy might be more hesitant, wary of being drawn into an imperial conquest that goes against their philosophy of strategic autonomy. The Chiss military may be willing to provide assistance, but this would be conditional on maintaining their independence and not becoming a pawn in the First Order's imperial ambitions. The Chiss and the Resistance. The Resistance, on the other hand, represents a very different set of values. While the Resistance fights for galactic freedom and opposing tyranny, their methods, though noble, are often chaotic, improvised, and unpredictable. The Chiss ascendancy, with its structured society and calculated approach to warfare, may find the Resistance's methods difficult to embrace. The Chiss value discipline, and the Resistance's reliance on guerrilla warfare and military improvisation may be viewed with skepticism. Nevertheless, the Resistance presents a compelling case for the Chiss in the broader context of galactic politics. The First Order represents a monolithic and totalitarian force, whereas the Resistance, despite its lack of resources and strategic support, seeks to restore freedom and oppose the oppressive regimes that threaten galactic peace. Palpatine's return and the Sith Eternal would likely push the Chiss ascendancy to consider a strategic alliance with the Resistance, particularly if the Sith's influence spreads into the unknown regions or poses a threat to the Chiss's homeland. The Resistance's fight against the Sith could align with the Chiss's desire to maintain autonomy and protect their borders from a growing dark side influence. Despite the Resistance's instability and lack of traditional military might, the Chiss ascendancy may see them as the lesser evil, especially in the face of the Sith Eternal's growing power. If the Chiss view the Resistance as the only viable option to counterbalance the First Order and Sith forces, they may choose to assist the Resistance with their superior military intelligence, technology, and strategic foresight. Such an alliance, however, would likely be based on mutual benefit, with the Chiss ascendancy maintaining a position of detached control, providing support without fully embracing the Resistance's values. As the galaxy shifts, the Chiss ascendancy's role within the larger galactic structure will inevitably evolve. Thrawn's death represents the loss of a figure who, for all intents and purposes, served as the ascendancy's link to the galaxy outside the unknown regions. His brilliance made him not just a military commander, but a statesman, a tactician, capable of navigating the most complex galactic scenarios. His absence leaves a power vacuum that will test the Chiss ascendancy's resolve, especially as new galactic powers rise. The Sith Eternal, the First Order, and the Resistance all represent forces of great change, each with its own vision of how the galaxy should be shaped. The Chiss ascendancy, while traditionally operating from the shadows, may find itself playing a more active role in galactic politics than it ever has before. Whether they ally with the First Order, the Resistance, or even remain neutral, their decisions will have far-reaching consequences, both for their people and for the galaxy at large. The Sith's growing influence, Kylo Ren's ambitions, and the Resistance's fragile survival are all factors the Chiss must take into account as they chart their future in this volatile new era. As the Chiss ascendancy contemplates its future, the galactic instability created by the Sith, the First Order, and the Resistance forces the Chiss to reevaluate their position within the galaxy. Although the Chiss have been defined by their seclusion, their time of isolation may be coming to an end, especially as external forces continue to press upon their borders. This section will explore the strategic decisions the Chiss might make in light of these new pressures, focusing on their military-political alliances and the way they might confront the challenges of external threats, as well as the internal evolution of Chiss leadership in the post-Thrawn era. The Chiss ascendancy's response to the Sith's influence. The Sith Eternal's rise in the unknown regions presents the Chiss ascendancy with one of the most immediate and dangerous threats. With Palpatine's return, the Sith now possess both the power and knowledge to potentially reshape the galaxy, and their dark side manipulation could extend far beyond their traditional influence in the unknown regions. The Chiss, known for their strategic brilliance and independent nature, may now find themselves forced to confront the Sith directly, particularly as the Sith Eternal looks to expand its control over more of the galaxy. Given the Chiss ascendancy's history of avoiding galactic politics, it is highly likely that they will initially seek to remain as neutral as possible, preferring to keep their dealings with the Sith as limited as possible. However, with Palpatine's resurrection, the Sith Eternal presents an existential threat to their territory and autonomy. If the Sith begin to expand their influence into the unknown regions, the Chiss will be faced with a difficult decision. Either form an alliance with the Sith, or risk defending their borders through force. The Sith's ability to manipulate the dark side and use force-based tactics could give them an edge in any conflict, making it even more imperative for the Chiss to rely on their military expertise and tactical ingenuity. While Thrawn's absence leaves the Chiss without their greatest tactician, the Chiss military is still among the most disciplined and highly skilled in the galaxy. They may choose to focus on defensive strategies and fortify their borders, using their superior knowledge of the unknown regions to outmaneuver the Sith should they seek to encroach upon Chiss territory. Chiss military doctrine. Adapting to galactic chaos. The Chiss military doctrine, while rooted in discipline and order, must adapt to the changing galactic conditions. The absence of Thrawn, the figure who epitomized the Chiss's military prowess, presents both a challenge and an opportunity. While no individual can truly replace Thrawn's genius, the Chiss military is structured to continue without reliance on any one leader. The Chiss Navy, with its advanced technology and tactical planning, remains a formidable force. But how the Chiss ascendancy chooses to employ their military in the face of Sith influence and the First Order's rise will determine their future role in galactic events. A shift in military strategy could be imminent. The Chiss ascendancy, historically focused on defensive tactics, may need to adopt more offensive strategies to protect their territory. Their focus on long-term planning and tactical precision could make them valuable allies to those opposing the Sith or First Order. Alternatively, the Chiss military may remain neutral, operating as a deterrent force, using their superior technological advantage and intelligence to keep both the First Order and the Sith Eternal at bay. The Chiss's military superiority, however, is not just about their weaponry or fleet size. It is also about their ability to anticipate enemy movements and outmaneuver their opponents. This strategic foresight could be key in any confrontation with the Sith, especially if the Chisses choose to adopt a more proactive stance in galactic conflicts. Their ability to play the long game is one of the Chiss ascendancy's greatest assets, and it will likely shape their response to the growing galactic threats. As the First Order rises in power, there is potential for strategic cooperation between them and the Chiss ascendancy. The First Order values order, discipline, and military might, qualities that the Chiss ascendancy shares. The First Order's rise, especially in the aftermath of the Galactic War, could create a natural alliance between the two powers, as both seek to establish control over the galaxy and suppress any forces that threaten their security. However, the Chiss may be cautious in entering into an alliance with the First Order. While their military strategies align, the First Order's authoritarian nature and its willingness to use brutal force may not sit well with the Chiss ascendancy. The Chiss have long valued self-sufficiency and independence, and the idea of aligning with a totalitarian regime may be at odds with their desire to maintain autonomy. It is possible that the Chiss ascendancy could form a military alliance with the First Order, but it would likely be a strategic partnership rather than a full-scale political alliance. The Chiss would want to ensure that they maintain control over their territory and military decisions without becoming fully involved in the First Order's expansive ambitions. They may choose to support the First Order in defeating external threats, but they would likely avoid becoming entangled in the First Order's imperial goals. The Chiss ascendancy's relationship with the First Order would be one of cautious cooperation, where both powers benefit from a shared military strategy, but the Chiss would remain mindful of their own independence. The rise of Kylo Ren and his ambitions for galactic domination would provide a clear contrast to the Chiss ascendancy's values of self-preservation and tactical neutrality. The First Order's expansion into the galaxy could push the Chiss into an uncomfortable position, forced to decide whether to align themselves fully with the First Order or to stand apart, continuing their isolated existence while watching galactic events unfold. Potential alliances with the Resistance. A pragmatic partnership. The Resistance, while imperfect and often in disarray, presents another possible ally for the Chiss ascendancy. While the Resistance's approach to galactic conflict is driven by a more improvised, idealistic pursuit of freedom and justice, the Chiss ascendancy may find value in their struggle against the First Order and Sith. The Chiss may not align with the Resistance's methods, but they could see the Resistance as the lesser evil compared to the First Order or Sith Eternal. A strategic partnership with the Resistance could be beneficial for the Chiss ascendancy, particularly if the Sith Eternal presents a growing threat to their territory. The Chiss may view the Resistance as a force of counterbalance, standing against the tyranny of both the First Order and the Sith, and might offer tactical support, military expertise, or intelligence. This would allow the Chiss ascendancy to maintain their independence, while still contributing to the galactic struggle against totalitarian regimes. Despite the Resistance's unstable nature, the Chiss ascendancy's military capabilities and their technological advantages could make them invaluable to the Resistance in their fight against the First Order. The Chiss are known for strategic planning, and their input could prove pivotal in organizing resistance movements or counteracting the growing influence of the First Order. A pragmatic alliance with the Resistance may allow the Chiss ascendancy to preserve its territory while keeping its autonomy intact without fully compromising its values. The Chiss ascendancy, defenders of the unknown regions. As the galaxy's balance of power shifts, the Chiss ascendancy faces an uncertain future. Will they choose to expand and play a more active role in galactic politics, or will they continue their tradition of strategic isolation? Regardless of the path they take, the Chiss will remain a force to be reckoned with, as their military expertise, tactical brilliance, and strategic knowledge of the unknown regions place them in a unique position to influence the galaxy's future. In the end, the Chiss ascendancy's future is shaped by their ability to adapt to the changing galactic landscape, and the decisions they make regarding their alliances with the Resistance, the First Order, or their response to the Sith Eternal will determine their role in the galaxy's ongoing struggles. As the Chiss ascendancy navigates through the shifting tides of galactic power, their path is fraught with both peril and opportunity. The galaxy is in flux, with the rise of new powers, the continued influence of the Sith, and the emergence of the First Order, all of which pose existential threats to the Chiss's long-standing isolation and independence. For the Chiss, the decision on whether to maintain their historical stance of strategic seclusion or to engage more directly in the galactic conflict will ultimately shape their future. This section delves into the Chiss ascendancy's strategy of self-preservation, their potential engagement with galactic politics, and how they might balance their internal values with the external pressures they face. Internal stability and the challenge of leadership. The Chiss leadership structure is not monolithic, but rather decentralized, with several powerful families and military leaders vying for influence. These factions may have different visions for the future of the Chiss people. One faction may advocate for maintaining isolation, focusing on preserving their autonomy in the unknown regions and avoiding galactic entanglements. Another faction may push for a more aggressive approach, engaging with the galaxy's powers either through alliances or strategic intervention to safeguard the Chiss ascendancy's interests. The internal political dynamics will play a crucial role in shaping the Chiss ascendancy's response to the galactic shifts. If the factions within the Chiss cannot unite under a single vision, it could lead to political instability, weakening their military and strategic positions. This fragmentation could leave the Chiss vulnerable to external threats, particularly from the Sith Eternal or the First Order, both of which may exploit any weakness or division among the Chiss to expand their influence in the unknown regions. Alternatively, a unified leadership could steer the Chiss ascendancy toward a more proactive role in galactic politics. If the Chiss decide that their independence is threatened by the growing power of the Sith or First Order, they may take the bold step of forming alliances, possibly even with the Resistance, to secure their survival and maintain their influence in the galaxy. Their military prowess, intelligence networks, and knowledge of the unknown regions could prove invaluable in navigating the turbulent galactic landscape. Strategic decision, isolation or intervention. One of the most pressing decisions facing the Chiss ascendancy is whether to remain isolated in the unknown regions or to intervene in galactic affairs. The Sith Eternal, with their growing power in the unknown regions, presents an immediate threat to the Chiss, and the First Order's expansion into the galaxy could also pose a dangerous challenge to their autonomy. The Chiss, known for their tactical genius and long-term planning, must consider the implications of intervening in a galaxy that is shifting rapidly due to the Sith and First Order. Remaining isolated could preserve the Chiss ascendancy's sovereignty, but it also carries significant risks. The galaxy is becoming more interconnected, and the Sith, in particular, are seeking to expand their influence and territory. The Chiss cannot afford to ignore these developments indefinitely. If they remain passive, they risk being caught in the crossfire of galactic powers, or worse, falling victim to Sith manipulation or infiltration. Palpatine's Sith, operating from the unknown regions, have the potential to infiltrate the Chiss military and political systems, using dark side powers to bend the Chiss to their will. However, the Chiss ascendancy is also well positioned to play a more active role in the galaxy if they choose to intervene. Their military expertise, advanced technology, and understanding of strategic warfare could make them valuable allies to forces opposed to the Sith or First Order. Aligning with the resistance, which seeks to oppose totalitarian regimes, might allow the Chiss ascendancy to counterbalance the Sith's power while maintaining their independence. The Chiss are keenly aware of the importance of alliances, and if they are to engage with galactic forces, they will likely choose allies carefully, ensuring that their interests align. The Sith, with their mastery of the dark side and their desire for galactic domination, may present the greatest challenge to the Chiss. If the Sith Eternal grows in strength, the Chiss ascendancy may be forced to confront them head-on. This could mean not just defending their borders, but also taking an active role in the galactic conflict, fighting for the preservation of their people and territory. The Chiss will need to decide whether their best course of action is to resist the Sith, form alliances, or remain neutral and protect their own interests, while the galaxy contends with its broader conflicts. The Chiss and galactic alliances, strategic considerations. If the Chiss ascendancy does decide to form alliances, the decision will likely be calculated and strategic rather than driven by ideological commitments. The Chiss are not a species given to emotional decisions or blind loyalty. Their alliances will be pragmatic, designed to advance their own interests and ensure the survival of their people. The First Order, with its authoritarian bent, may offer the Chiss an opportunity to secure military protection and resources, but the Chiss ascendancy would be hesitant to become fully aligned with a regime that seeks absolute control. The Resistance, while more ideologically aligned with the Chiss in terms of opposing tyranny, represents a less stable and more chaotic force. While the Resistance's goals are admirable, their tactics may be seen as disruptive, and their military capabilities are often limited by resource shortages. For the Chiss ascendancy, an alliance with the Resistance could be a necessary evil, one that ensures their survival against the growing threat of the First Order and the Sith Eternal. In choosing alliances, the Chiss will need to weigh the long-term consequences of their decisions. Aligning with the First Order or the Resistance could have significant ramifications for their autonomy and their position in galactic politics. While the Chiss ascendancy values their independence, the rising Sith influence and the First Order's territorial ambitions may force them into a position where they have no choice but to choose sides in a galaxy increasingly torn between imperial dominance and the forces of resistance. The Chiss beyond Thrawn, the future of a strategic people. In the end, the Chiss ascendancy's future lies in their ability to adapt to a galaxy that is in a constant state of flux. Thrawn's death marks the end of an era, but it also opens the door for new leaders to rise and guide the Chiss through the complexities of galactic politics. Whether the Chiss ascendancy chooses to remain isolated or engage with the broader galaxy, their military strength and strategic foresight will remain their greatest assets. The Chiss are strategists by nature, and their response to the growing Sith threat, the rise of the First Order, and the Sith Eternal's influence will define their role in the galaxy's future. Whether they align with the Resistance, form a strategic partnership with the First Order, or resist the encroaching forces on their own, the Chiss ascendancy will be a significant factor in the galaxy's ongoing struggle for control. Their decisions will shape not only the future of their people, but also the future of the galaxy at large. As the Chiss ascendancy contemplates its place in a galaxy defined by external threats and political upheavals, the unknown regions play a pivotal role in the Chiss's future. The Chiss, as a species, have long been isolated within the unknown regions, but as galactic forces continue to shape the future of the galaxy, the Chiss will be forced to decide whether to continue their policy of seclusion or to engage more actively in galactic conflicts. The unknown regions, Chiss territory, at the crossroads. The unknown regions, once considered a mysterious, largely unexplored expanse of the galaxy, now stand at the crossroads of galactic politics. While the Chiss ascendancy has traditionally maintained a fortress mentality, ensuring that their territory remains protected and their secrets remain hidden, external threats are forcing them to reevaluate their position. The Sith Eternal, operating in the unknown regions, presents a direct and immediate challenge to the Chiss ascendancy's territorial integrity. Palpatine's return, with the power to manipulate the dark side and his desire to expand the Sith's influence into the unknown regions, could have serious ramifications for the Chiss. For the Chiss ascendancy, the unknown regions are more than just their home. They are also a source of strategic advantage and hidden power. With Thrawn's death, the Chiss must decide whether to defend their borders from the Sith Eternal's expansion or to form a temporary alliance with external galactic powers in order to secure their future. The Sith's potential to infiltrate the unknown regions or even use dark side powers to manipulate the Chiss presents a serious danger. The Chiss, with their extensive knowledge of the unknown regions, are uniquely positioned to either counteract the Sith threat or become pawns in the Sith's larger plan for domination. Chiss diplomacy, navigating galactic alliances. Despite their history of isolation, the Chiss ascendancy may be drawn into galactic politics more than ever before. The Sith, the First Order, and the Resistance all represent different ideological forces, and the Chiss ascendancy must navigate these external powers carefully. Their military expertise and strategic intelligence make them a potential ally or enemy to these factions, depending on their decision-making. The Chiss and the Sith Eternal. The Sith Eternal, represented by Palpatine's resurrection, is a dark side force that has the potential to undermine the Chiss ascendancy's sovereignty. Palpatine's power, deeply rooted in the dark side of the Force, is dangerous and manipulative, making any engagement with the Sith incredibly precarious for the Chiss. While the Chiss have long remained isolated, the Sith Eternal's rise within the unknown regions presents a threat they cannot ignore. The Chiss ascendancy's knowledge of their own territory gives them an edge, but the Sith's mastery of dark side manipulation could turn even the most formidable defense into a vulnerable weakness. The Chiss and the First Order. The First Order, led by Kylo Ren, represents another potential ally or adversary for the Chiss ascendancy. The First Order shares certain values with the Chiss, particularly in their emphasis on military strength, order, and control. The First Order, like the Chiss, is deeply invested in maintaining a strict sense of discipline and organization, which could make them a natural ally for the Chiss if the Sith continue to expand their influence. However, the Chiss ascendancy would have to carefully assess the First Order's true intentions, as the First Order's imperial ambitions may be at odds with the Chiss's desire to preserve their independence. While the First Order could provide military strength to the Chiss in the event of a Sith invasion, the Chiss ascendancy would likely remain cautious about allying with a totalitarian regime. Kylo Ren's rise, while representing a shift in the First Order's leadership, may not fully align with the Chiss's values of autonomy and strategic control. The Chiss ascendancy, known for its methodical and calculated military strategy, may find the First Order's approach to be too brutal and unchecked. The Chiss would need to balance their need for security with their desire to maintain their independence from outside powers like the First Order. The Chiss and the Resistance. The Chiss ascendancy's decision to align with the Resistance will depend on the growing threats they face from the First Order and Sith, as well as their willingness to cooperate with forces that may not always adhere to the Chiss's standards of strategy. Still, the Resistance may prove to be a strategic ally in the battle against the First Order and Sith, especially if the Chiss ascendancy sees their own survival tied to the Resistance's success. The Chiss and Galactic Engagement, a future in the Galaxy Sep's struggle. The future of the Chiss ascendancy hinges on their ability to adapt to the galactic conflict surrounding them. The Chiss ascendancy's fate will ultimately be determined by the decisions made by their leaders, whether they choose to engage in galactic politics, form alliances, or defend their sovereignty from the growing dark side influence. The Chiss military will likely remain a critical component of their defensive strategy, but how the Chiss ascendancy positions itself in the face of galactic powers will determine their future role in the galaxy. Whether they become a key player in galactic politics or continue to operate from the shadows, their tactical expertise and strategic intelligence will ensure that they are not easily overlooked. As the Chiss ascendancy contemplates its future, the unknown regions and their potential role in galactic politics will be pivotal in determining the direction they take. The growing influence of the Sith, the First Order, and the Resistance means that the Chiss can no longer remain completely isolated. Their strategic brilliance, advanced technology, and military capabilities position them as a potential power broker in the galaxy. But how they choose to interact with these rising forces will have significant consequences for their future. The unknown regions, a strategic advantage or a hidden threat. The unknown regions, while historically a place of seclusion for the Chiss, have now become a focal point of galactic interest. The Sith Eternal, with Palpatine's return, has begun to establish a significant presence in the unknown regions, and this shift presents a critical challenge to the Chiss ascendancy. The Chiss have long held the advantage of knowing their territory intimately, its resources, hidden dangers, and strategic value. However, as Sith influence grows, the Chiss will need to decide whether to defend their borders, expand their influence, or form alliances with other galactic powers to ensure their survival. The Chiss have maintained a policy of secrecy and self-preservation, relying on their military superiority and technological advancements to remain a quiet power in the galaxy. The unknown regions are not just their home, they are also a strategic asset that could be exploited by outside forces if not properly defended. The Sith Eternal, with their mastery of the dark side, could be a significant threat, attempting to manipulate or subjugate the Chiss ascendancy through dark side forces. The First Order might also see the unknown regions as a potential source of new territories or military resources, and the Chiss would have to decide whether to resist or engage with these growing threats. One option for the Chiss ascendancy is to remain isolated, continuing their historical approach of non-interference. However, this strategy is becoming increasingly difficult as the Sith and the First Order expand their influence across the galaxy. Palpatine's Sith Eternal, with their dark side forces, may pose a threat not just to the Chiss, but to the very stability of the unknown regions. The First Order may also seek to expand into this unexplored space, creating friction with the Chiss ascendancy. The Chiss, while capable of maintaining defensive strength, will likely find it difficult to resist these rising forces for much longer, without compromising their own values of autonomy. The Chiss ascendancy's position, neutrality, or engagement. The Chiss ascendancy's future hinges on their ability to strategically engage with the broader galactic conflict. Historically, the Chiss have avoided becoming entangled in the larger power struggles of the galaxy, preferring instead to focus on their own territory and military dominance. However, the Sith's rise, along with the First Order's expansion, forces the Chiss ascendancy to reconsider their position. The Chiss are a highly intelligent species, and their military capabilities are second to none. However, their strategic foresight and neutrality may no longer be enough to ensure their survival. One potential strategy for the Chiss ascendancy is to remain neutral, continuing their policy of non-interference and seclusion. This would allow them to preserve their autonomy and independence, avoiding the risks associated with galactic entanglements. However, neutrality may not be viable in the face of growing Sith and First Order ambitions. The Chiss would need to maintain a careful balance between avoiding unnecessary conflict and defending their borders from encroaching powers. This would require strategic foresight and an ability to counteract threats without directly engaging in galactic politics. Alternatively, the Chiss ascendancy could choose to engage with the broader galaxy, forming alliances or cooperating with other factions to ensure their survival. The Resistance could be a potential ally, as both the Chiss and the Resistance share common goals of opposing tyranny and defending autonomy. However, the Resistance's more improvised tactics and disorganization might not align with the Chiss ascendancy's preference for methodical planning and military discipline. On the other hand, the First Order, with its focus on imperial dominance and control, could offer the Chiss ascendancy a more structured and stable partnership. However, this alliance would come at the cost of the Chiss's autonomy, as the First Order's totalitarian nature may conflict with the Chiss's values of independence. Ultimately, the Chiss ascendancy will need to assess their long-term goals and decide whether to maintain their isolation or take a more active role in galactic politics. Their strategic genius and military capabilities provide them with a unique advantage, but their decision to engage with other powers will determine their role in the galaxy moving forward. The Chiss and galactic politics, shaping their legacy. The Chiss ascendancy's legacy will be shaped by their ability to adapt to the changing dynamics of the galaxy. The Sith Eternal's return, combined with the First Order's rise, creates a complex and shifting political environment, one that will force the Chiss to decide how to navigate the galaxy's power structures. Thrawn's absence leaves a leadership void that will be filled by new Chiss leaders, each with their own vision of how to protect and expand the Chiss ascendancy's power. Whether the Chiss ascendancy chooses to remain neutral, form alliances, or take a more proactive role, their legacy will depend on their ability to maintain their independence and survive the growing pressures of external forces. The Sith, the First Order, and the resistance will continue to shape the galaxy's future, but the Chiss must ensure that their place in the galaxy is preserved. Their ability to adapt to these changing dynamics while holding true to their values of autonomy, discipline, and strategic foresight will ultimately determine their future role. The Chiss Ascendancy's future is uncertain, but it remains clear that they are not a species that can be easily dismissed. Their strategic brilliance, advanced military technology, and knowledge of the unknown regions give them a unique advantage, but their response to the growing influence of the Sith, the First Order, and the galaxy's larger conflicts will shape their ultimate destiny. Whether they rise to become a major galactic power or continue to operate from the shadows, their future will depend on their ability to adapt and navigate the galactic turmoil. As the Chiss Ascendancy considers its future, a critical element of their path forward will be how they confront the rising galactic forces that threaten their independence and territory. The Sith Eternal's resurgence, along with the First Order's expansion, will have significant consequences for the Chiss. The Chiss Ascendancy's ability to adapt to these changing galactic dynamics will not only determine their role in galactic politics, but also their survival in an increasingly unstable galaxy. This section will delve into the Chiss military's adaptability, their potential engagement with galactic conflicts, and how their unique strategic mindset could reshape their future in the galaxy. Chiss military superiority. Leveraging tactical genius. The Chiss military, long regarded as one of the most efficient and disciplined forces in the galaxy, will play a critical role in the Ascendancy's future. Even in the absence of Thrawn, the Chiss have an incredibly sophisticated military doctrine and tactical expertise that gives them an edge in both defensive and offensive operations. The Chiss military is known for its precision, strategic foresight, and adaptability, all of which will be critical in responding to the growing external threats posed by the First Order and the Sith Eternal. One of the key strengths of the Chiss military is their ability to anticipate enemy movements and outmaneuver adversaries. While the Sith Eternal seeks to impose dark side control over the galaxy, their methods are rooted in manipulation and deception, often leaving them vulnerable to well-placed military action. The Chiss, with their expertise in strategic warfare, may be able to exploit these vulnerabilities. Their superior understanding of the unknown regions could also provide a critical advantage, as the Sith Eternal may not have the same level of intelligence or knowledge of this region's complexities. The Chiss military, therefore, has the potential to serve as both a formidable defense against external threats and a strategic force that could help shape the future of galactic power dynamics. However, the First Order's approach is different. They value military strength and imperial control, qualities that the Chiss may find easier to understand and navigate. The Chiss Ascendancy's military could theoretically support the First Order if the First Order's goals align with their territorial interests. However, the First Order's aggression and totalitarian ambition may ultimately be at odds with the Chiss Ascendancy's values of autonomy and independence. While a military alliance with the First Order may offer temporary security, it may come at the cost of the Chiss's freedom to operate according to their own principles. Political maneuvering, securing alliances, or maintaining autonomy. On the other hand, an alliance with the Resistance could present a counterbalance to the Sith Eternal's growing power. The Resistance, though facing immense odds, represents the forces of freedom and galactic self-determination, values that the Chiss Ascendancy might consider worthy of support. If the Chiss decide that the Sith Eternal poses a significant existential threat, aligning with the Resistance could provide a means of counteracting that threat while still maintaining their autonomy. However, The Resistance's disorganization and lack of resources would make such an alliance more complicated. While their ideological alignment with the Resistance might seem like a natural fit, the Chiss ascendancy would need to carefully consider whether their strategic partnership with the Resistance is worth the potential risks to their long-term stability. Another political path open to the Chiss ascendancy is maintaining neutrality and focusing on their self-preservation. Historically, the Chiss have avoided entanglement in galactic conflicts, and this path would allow them to continue their long-standing policy of isolation. The Chiss and the Unknown Regions, a gateway to power. The Unknown Regions are more than just the Chiss's home. They represent a strategic resource in the galaxy. The Sith Eternal's expansion into this uncharted territory raises the stakes for the Chiss ascendancy. If Palpatine's Sith can establish a foothold in the Unknown Regions, they could gain access to valuable resources and strategic positions that could threaten the Chiss ascendancy's control over this part of the galaxy. The Chiss are deeply connected to the Unknown Regions. Their knowledge of this region has been one of their greatest advantages. They know how to defend and manipulate the terrain of the Unknown Regions to their benefit. The Chiss legacy, a species on the brink of transformation. The Chiss ascendancy's future is uncertain, but one thing is clear: they are at a critical juncture in their history. The Sith Eternal's rise, the First Order's expansion, and the growing influence of the Resistance mean that the Chiss ascendancy cannot remain on the sidelines forever. Their strategic brilliance and military expertise give them an unparalleled advantage, but their decisions regarding alliances, their engagement with galactic powers, and their ability to preserve their autonomy will determine their role in the galaxy's future. Whether they choose to remain isolated or take a more active role in galactic politics, the Chiss ascendancy must adapt to the changing dynamics of a galaxy that is increasingly divided by dark side forces and imperial ambitions. The Chiss will have to decide whether they want to be passive observers of galactic events or active participants, shaping their future and their legacy in the galaxy's ongoing struggle for power. Regardless of their choice, the Chiss ascendancy is poised to play a pivotal role in the future of the galaxy, guided by their strategic minds, advanced technology, and unyielding desire to preserve their independence. As the Chiss ascendancy continues to grapple with its evolving role in the galaxy, the galactic political landscape is undergoing rapid transformations. The growing influence of Sith Eternal, the First Order, and the continuing presence of the Resistance all intersect at the crossroads of Chiss survival and strategic action. The Chiss and the growing influence of the Sith. The Sith Eternal's rise, embodied by Palpatine's return, poses the most immediate threat to the Chiss ascendancy's survival. For the Chiss, the Unknown Regions represent both a strength and a vulnerability as Palpatine's Sith grow in power from this very space. If the Sith were to establish a foothold within the Chiss's home territory, they would have a significant strategic advantage, and the Chiss could quickly lose their autonomy. The Chiss are known for their strategic foresight, and they understand that Sith manipulation is not something to take lightly. The Sith Eternal's dark side influence could easily infiltrate and undermine the Chiss military and leadership, as Palpatine's Sith have done in other parts of the galaxy. The Chiss ascendancy, with its deeply ingrained military discipline and strategic precision, is not typically vulnerable to such forces. However, the Sith Eternal's mastery over the dark side of the Force may test the Chiss's traditional military strategies in ways they have never faced before. To counteract the Sith threat, the Chiss ascendancy may need to adjust their military doctrine. The Chiss have always prided themselves on their strategic intelligence, their ability to anticipate enemy movements, and their advanced technological capabilities. However, the Sith's use of the dark side is unpredictable, making it difficult for the Chiss to plan in their typical manner. The Chiss military may need to embrace new tactics to confront this new dark side threat, incorporating countermeasures for Sith manipulation and resisting any attempt at dark side infiltration. At the same time, the Chiss ascendancy could choose to forge alliances to strengthen their resistance to the Sith Eternal's rise. This could involve forming tactical partnerships with the Resistance, First Order, or even more neutral galactic powers. If the Chiss ascendancy decides to engage directly with the Sith, they may need to form a coalition that allows them to survive and defend their territory. The Chiss and the First Order. A calculated military partnership. The First Order, while often seen as a militaristic power with its own authoritarian goals, could present a strategic opportunity for the Chiss ascendancy, especially in light of the growing Sith threat. The First Order's goals of control and order may align with the Chiss ascendancy's military doctrine, though their methods may be at odds with the Chiss's values of autonomy and independence. The First Order is a regime driven by a desire for dominance and imperial control over the galaxy, and their military strength is undeniable. The Chiss ascendancy, with its own highly disciplined military, could serve as a valuable asset to the First Order, particularly in the unknown regions. The First Order may view the Chiss ascendancy as a strategic ally, capable of bolstering their military strength in key areas of the galaxy. The Chiss, for their part, might see the First Order as a way to counterbalance the Sith Eternal's influence, using the First Order's military support to defend their territory and preserve their sovereignty. However, the Chiss ascendancy's long history of isolation and independence will make any alliance with the First Order a complicated decision. While the First Order shares many of the Chiss ascendancy's values of military discipline and order, their authoritarian control is fundamentally at odds with the Chiss's desire for autonomy. The Chiss would likely only align themselves with the First Order if they see mutual benefit, particularly if it allows them to preserve their independence and territorial control in the face of the Sith Eternal's encroachment. An alliance with the First Order would likely be temporary, and the Chiss would remain cautious of any attempts to subjugate their people or territory. Their primary goal would be self-preservation, and they would likely view any military alliance with the First Order as a means to an end, rather than a long-term partnership. The Chiss ascendancy's military would remain a self-sustaining force, using any alliances strategically to counteract the threats posed by the First Order's rivals, and more critically, the Sith Eternal. The Resistance represents a different kind of ally for the Chiss ascendancy, one driven by freedom, autonomy, and opposition to totalitarianism. The Chiss ascendancy and the Resistance share common interests in opposing oppressive regimes and defending their territories from the rise of forces like the First Order and the Sith Eternal. However, while the Resistance's values align with the Chiss, their methods of warfare may not be as effective for a species so focused on tactical precision and military structure. The Resistance's improvised tactics and reliance on guerrilla warfare could be a challenge for the Chiss, who prefer more controlled and calculated approaches to military conflict. Despite this, the Chiss ascendancy may recognize that forming an alliance with the Resistance could help them defend their territory from the growing Sith and First Order influence. The Resistance's commitment to freedom and autonomy could align with the Chiss ascendancy's goals, even if their military strategies differ. If the Chiss ascendancy sees the Resistance as a necessary counterbalance to the Sith and First Order, They may be willing to offer strategic support, providing intelligence, tactical expertise, or even military assets in key areas of the galaxy. This would allow the Chiss to maintain their neutrality in the broader galactic conflict, while still contributing to the Resistance's struggle against forces that threaten both freedom and independence. The future of the Chiss ascendancy is uncertain. But one thing is clear: the galaxy is changing, and the Chiss must adapt to survive. Whether they choose to remain isolated, form alliances, or take more active roles in galactic events, the Chiss ascendancy will have to navigate the complex web of galactic politics to preserve their independence. Their military brilliance, tactical foresight, and technological superiority will be their greatest assets in this new age of galactic uncertainty. However, the Sith Eternal, the First Order, and the Resistance will all demand careful consideration from the Chiss, and their decisions in the face of these growing powers will determine the future of the Chiss ascendancy. Will they continue their policy of neutrality, or will they engage more directly in galactic struggles? The Chiss ascendancy's legacy will depend on the choices they make in this critical juncture of galactic history. As the Chiss ascendancy contemplates its future, their military strategy, diplomatic alliances, and territorial defense will be vital in ensuring their survival and relevance in the shifting galactic landscape. The Chiss ascendancy sips military doctrine, adapting to new threats. The Chiss military has always been defined by its rigid structure and strategic discipline, but the rising threats from the Sith, First Order, and the broader galactic conflicts demand that they adapt and evolve. The Chiss ascendancy's military is not just a collection of soldiers. It is a reflection of their broader cultural values of order, self-sufficiency, and tactical brilliance. However, the galactic shifts that have unfolded over the past few decades, particularly the rise of Palpatine's Sith Eternal, the expansion of the First Order, and the persistent struggle of the Resistance, have forced the Chiss to reconsider their position. As a military force, the Chiss are highly disciplined and advanced, but their strategy has typically focused on defense and isolation. With growing threats from both internal and external forces, the Chiss ascendancy may have to shift from a purely defensive posture to a more proactive military strategy. The Sith Eternal, with its dark side power and expansionist ambitions, presents a unique challenge. Unlike traditional military threats, the Sith operate using manipulation and dark side abilities, making conventional military tactics less effective. Moreover, the First Order's rise to power also represents a significant military challenge for the Chiss. While the First Order's imperial nature and totalitarian ambitions conflict with the Chiss ascendancy's values, their military might cannot be ignored. The First Order's goal of galactic domination could potentially bring the Chiss into direct conflict with them, even though their strategic instincts might seek to avoid unnecessary confrontation. The Chiss ascendancy's military will likely need to develop new ways of dealing with the First Order's military expansion, especially given the First Order's reliance on brute force as opposed to tactical manipulation. In order to maintain their autonomy and territorial integrity, the Chiss may find themselves embarking on new military strategies, focusing on not just defending their borders, but also exerting influence in the galaxy. Their long-term survival may depend on how well they adapt to this new age of galactic warfare, where the Sith Eternal's dark side forces and the First Order's military dominance could overwhelm traditional defensive tactics. In the past, the Chiss ascendancy could rely on their secrecy and strategic planning to stay out of galactic conflicts. Now they may have to take active steps to prevent their enemies from encroaching on their territory. The Chiss and galactic politics. A new role in a shifting galaxy. The Chiss ascendancy, traditionally a hidden power within the unknown regions, now faces the challenge of determining its role in an increasingly turbulent galaxy. The galactic political landscape is shifting, with the First Order, Resistance, and Sith Eternal all vying for control over the galaxy. The Chiss, with their military expertise and strategic intelligence, are positioned to play a central role in the future of the galaxy, but they must decide whether to remain neutral or actively engage with these rising powers. The First Order presents a potential strategic partner for the Chiss, given their shared military discipline and authoritarian goals. However, the Chiss ascendancy's values of independence and autonomy make it unlikely that they will fully align themselves with a power like the First Order. The Chiss have long valued their freedom, and while they may be willing to cooperate with the First Order on certain military objectives, they are unlikely to become a vassal to the First Order's imperial control. The Sith Eternal, led by Palpatine, represents a much more complex threat for the Chiss ascendancy. On one hand, Palpatine's manipulation and dark side powers could offer the Chiss a means of survival against other galactic threats. However, the Sith's long-standing goal of galactic domination runs counter to the Chiss ascendancy's values of autonomy and independence. Palpatine's return represents a critical challenge for the Chiss ascendancy, one that could push them into a position where they must choose between resisting the Sith Eternal and protecting their people at all costs. The Chiss ascendancy may also find themselves forced to form alliances with these rising powers, even if only to preserve their autonomy in the face of these larger threats. Their military strength and intelligence will be vital in any political engagement they choose to pursue. However, the Chiss ascendancy will always maintain their core value of self-preservation, ensuring that any alliances they form are in their best interests and do not undermine their independence. The future of the Chiss. A strategic legacy. The Chiss ascendancy's future hinges on how they navigate the galaxy's shifting political and military landscape. With the Sith Eternal rising in power, the First Order expanding its control, and the Resistance struggling to maintain freedom, the Chiss ascendancy stands at a crossroads. They must decide whether to remain neutral, form alliances, or take a more active role in the galaxy's ongoing conflicts. Whether the Chiss ascendancy chooses to remain isolated, form alliances, or engage directly in the galaxy's political and military conflicts, their future will depend on their ability to adapt to the new galactic realities they face. The Chiss are not a species that can be easily dismissed or ignored, and they will continue to play a vital role in the galaxy's ongoing struggles. As the Chiss ascendancy moves forward, the fundamental question of leadership will continue to shape their future in the galaxy. The post-Thrawn era represents a time of great uncertainty for the Chiss, as they must address both internal and external challenges. The leadership vacuum, challenges and opportunities. Following Thrawn's death, the Chiss ascendancy faces a leadership crisis that threatens its internal stability. Thrawn was not only a military genius, but also a unifying figure who held the Chiss together through his vision of strategic supremacy and autonomy. His leadership provided both the military and political direction needed to maintain the Chiss ascendancy's position in the galaxy. Without his guiding influence, the Chiss are left to decide who will step into the vacuum left by his absence. The Chiss ascendancy's political structure, which is centered around a council of leaders and a combination of military and political leaders, is well suited to navigating this transition. However, the lack of a single powerful figurehead could lead to factionalism and internal divisions. Rival factions within the Chiss military and political elite may begin to vie for control, each with their own vision for how the Chiss ascendancy should respond to the growing galactic conflict. The Chiss military, always focused on order, discipline, and tactical supremacy, could fracture into competing camps if leadership becomes unclear or contested. A critical issue for the Chiss ascendancy will be maintaining internal cohesion during this time of uncertainty. Leadership factions may emerge within the Chiss military that prioritize either military action against galactic threats or a defensive posture that focuses on preserving autonomy without engaging in galactic politics. The Chiss military has always been a highly disciplined force. This internal power struggle within the Chiss ascendancy could shape their future in galactic politics, as a fragmented Chiss leadership may struggle to make cohesive decisions when confronted with rising galactic powers. The success of the Chiss ascendancy will depend on whether a new leader, or perhaps a coalition of leaders, can unite the Chiss military and political factions under a singular vision, maintaining both autonomy and security in the face of these growing external threats. Unifying the Chiss. Potential for a new leader. For the Chiss ascendancy to navigate the turbulent galactic landscape and maintain their autonomy, they must find a way to unify their leadership. The internal leadership vacuum left by Thrawn's death could open the door for new leadership, but the successor to Thrawn must be someone who embodies the same qualities that made Thrawn an effective and beloved leader: strategic genius, military discipline, and a vision for the long-term survival of the Chiss people. A new leader would have to command respect within the Chiss military and political elite, as well as secure the loyalty of the Chiss people. They would need to strike a delicate balance between preserving the Chiss ascendancy's autonomy and responding to the growing galactic pressures. The new Chiss leader would also have to navigate the competing interests within the Chiss ascendancy, particularly those factions that prioritize either a more aggressive military approach or a focused defensive strategy that keeps the Chiss as a secluded, independent force. In the post-Thrawn era, there could be multiple candidates for leadership, each with their own vision of the Chiss ascendancy's role in the galaxy. Some factions may seek a leader who prioritizes diplomacy and caution, focusing on preserving the Chiss ascendancy's isolation and avoiding any entanglement in galactic conflicts. Others may push for a more assertive leader who seeks to expand the Chiss ascendancy's influence and engage more directly with galactic powers, like the First Order, Resistance, or even the Sith Eternal. The Chiss ascendancy's future will largely depend on which of these factions prevails in the leadership struggle. If the Chiss military and political elite can unite behind a strong leader, the Chiss ascendancy could emerge as a formidable force in galactic politics. However, if internal divisions persist, the Chiss ascendancy may be at risk of becoming irrelevant or vulnerable to external manipulation, particularly from the Sith Eternal or the First Order. The Chiss ascendancy sips influence in a shifting galactic order. With the galactic order in flux, the Chiss ascendancy faces a pivotal moment in history. The First Order and Sith Eternal pose existential threats to their autonomy, while the Resistance represents a potential ally in their struggle for independence. The Chiss ascendancy has always maintained a careful balance between internal discipline and strategic autonomy, but the galactic shifts caused by the rise of the Sith and First Order will test their ability to maintain this balance. The Chiss ascendancy's role in galactic politics will largely depend on their ability to adapt to these new political realities. If the Chiss decide to engage more actively in galactic affairs, they may secure alliances with the Resistance or First Order to counter the Sith Eternal's growing power. The Chiss military, which has long been focused on defending their territory and avoiding galactic entanglements, may find that the growing galactic conflict forces them to reconsider their priorities. The Sith Eternal, with their ability to manipulate the dark side, and the First Order, with their imperial ambitions, represent existential threats to the Chiss Ascendancy's survival. In light of these threats, the Chiss Ascendancy may choose to intervene in galactic politics to protect their sovereignty, while still maintaining the core values of discipline, order, and self-preservation. The Chiss Legacy, shaping the future of the Ascendancy. The Chiss Ascendancy's future will be defined by their ability to adapt to the growing galactic threats, their leadership choices, and their capacity to engage with the larger galactic powers. Ultimately, the Chiss Ascendancy's legacy will be shaped by their ability to preserve their independence, maintain their military strength, and secure their place in a galaxy torn apart by the ambitions of the Sith, the First Order, and the Resistance. The Chiss Ascendancy stands at a critical crossroads, and their choices in the years to come will determine whether they remain a hidden power, an active participant in galactic events, or a casualty of the growing conflict. As the Chiss Ascendancy continues to navigate the evolving galactic order, their future will depend not only on their internal leadership and military strategies, but also on how they manage the dynamics of galactic power. With the Sith Eternal, the First Order, and the Resistance vying for control, the Chiss Ascendancy stands at a crossroads where their decisions will shape their legacy and role in the galaxy. This section will examine the potential for Chiss diplomatic engagement, the strategic implications of their actions, and how their unique position in the galaxy could influence the broader balance of power. The Chiss's diplomatic approach will likely be shaped by their core values of autonomy, self-preservation, and strategic foresight. If they choose to remain isolated, they will risk being caught in the crossfire between the First Order, the Sith, and the Resistance. This could lead to the Chiss Ascendancy being drawn into galactic conflicts against their will, leaving them vulnerable to external control or manipulation. However, remaining neutral could also allow them to preserve their borders and autonomy without engaging directly in galactic power struggles. If the Chiss Ascendancy decides to engage diplomatically, they will need to navigate the complexities of galactic politics. An alliance with the Resistance, for example, could offer tactical support in resisting the growing power of the First Order and the Sith Eternal. However, the Chiss have historically viewed the Resistance as a disorganized and chaotic force that operates outside the strict military discipline the Chiss value. Aligning with the First Order, on the other hand, could provide a more structured partnership, but it would come with the risk of losing independence and becoming entangled in the First Order's imperial ambitions. The Chiss and galactic diplomacy. Forming alliances. The question of alliances will be a critical one for the Chiss Ascendancy. The First Order, with its imperial expansion and militaristic agenda, could offer the Chiss access to military support and resources in the face of Sith Eternal and Resistance forces. However, an alliance with the First Order would come at a significant cost. The Chiss Ascendancy would risk losing their autonomy in the long term, potentially becoming a satellite state under the First Order's control. Conversely, aligning with the Resistance could allow the Chiss Ascendancy to maintain their independence while fighting against the Sith Eternal and First Order. The Resistance's fight for freedom and galactic self-determination could appeal to the Chiss Ascendancy, but the Resistance's lack of military infrastructure could make them a less reliable partner. An alliance with the Resistance would require the Chiss to provide military support, tactical expertise, and intelligence, assets that could turn the Resistance's fight into a more viable struggle against the Sith Eternal and First Order. However, the Chiss ascendancy may choose to avoid direct alliances altogether and instead pursue a more neutral strategy. Strategic neutrality could allow the Chiss to preserve their autonomy while gathering intelligence from both the First Order and Resistance. By remaining neutral, the Chiss ascendancy could play the role of power broker, offering military expertise and intelligence support without fully committing to any one side. This approach would allow the Chiss to maintain their strategic independence while positioning themselves as a key player in the galaxy's ongoing conflicts. The Chiss in the unknown regions, defending their territory. The unknown regions are not just the Chiss ascendancy's home, they are a strategic asset that provides the Chiss with the resources, knowledge, and territorial advantage to shape their future. The Sith Eternal, with its ambitions to expand into the unknown regions, represents a direct threat to the Chiss ascendancy's control over their own territory. If the Chiss fail to defend their borders, they risk losing their strategic advantage to the Sith, who could use the unknown regions as a base to expand their influence and conquer other galactic territories. The Chiss military, with its advanced technologies and tactical brilliance, is well equipped to defend the unknown regions against external threats. However, as the Sith Eternal grows in strength, the Chiss will need to adapt their military strategies to counter the dark side influence that the Sith wield. The Chiss ascendancy will need to fortify their borders, not just with military power, but with intelligence networks, counterintelligence operations, and defensive technologies that can neutralize the Sith's dark side and prevent their encroachment into the unknown regions. The Chiss military has always valued defensive strategies, and their knowledge of the unknown regions gives them a unique advantage in protecting their territory. However, the Sith Eternal's dark side influence presents a new kind of threat, one that the Chiss ascendancy has never faced before. In addition to traditional military defenses, the Chiss may need to develop new technologies or countermeasures to protect themselves from the dark side's influence and resist Sith manipulation. This will require a new kind of military innovation that combines the Chiss's strategic brilliance with their knowledge of the unknown regions and their advanced technologies. The Chiss ascendancy, a future shaped by their choices. The Sith Eternal, First Order, and Resistance all represent challenges and opportunities for the Chiss ascendancy. The Chiss will need to carefully balance their need for strategic survival with their commitment to maintaining independence. The decisions they make now will determine whether the Chiss ascendancy becomes a major force in the galactic struggle or whether they remain isolated in their territory, watching as the galaxy around them is reshaped. Ultimately, the Chiss ascendancy is at a critical juncture in its history. The choices they make regarding diplomacy, alliances, and military strategy will determine not only their survival, but also their legacy in the galaxy. Whether they choose to remain neutral, form alliances, or actively participate in galactic events, the Chiss ascendancy will continue to play a significant role in shaping the future of the galaxy. The future of the Chiss ascendancy remains intricately tied to the decisions they make in the face of external and internal challenges. The Sith Eternal, the First Order, and the Resistance all present unique challenges and opportunities that will force the Chiss to re-examine their historical stance of isolation. The Chiss ascendancy's military prowess, strategic intelligence, and knowledge of the unknown regions give them a distinct advantage, but how they choose to navigate the evolving galactic landscape will determine their survival and influence. The leadership vacuum left by Thrawn's death is a critical issue, as the Chiss ascendancy must find a way to unite their internal factions under a cohesive leadership. The outcome of this internal struggle will directly affect their ability to respond to the growing threats from the Sith Eternal and the First Order. Whether they decide to align with the Resistance, form an alliance with the First Order, or remain neutral, the Chiss ascendancy must carefully assess the long-term consequences of these decisions. The Sith Eternal's dark side manipulation and the First Order's imperial ambitions present existential threats to their autonomy. The Chiss will need to employ their unparalleled military intelligence and strategic foresight to navigate these dangers, ensuring their territorial defense and independence are preserved. In the end, the Chiss ascendancy's legacy will depend on their adaptability in an ever-changing galaxy. Their ability to outmaneuver threats, maintain internal cohesion, and secure alliances that align with their core values will define their role in the galaxy. Whether they rise to become a central force in galactic politics or continue their legacy as a hidden power in the unknown regions, the Chiss ascendancy will remain a critical player in the galaxy's ongoing struggle for power, autonomy, and survival. The Chiss are poised to shape their future, not through brute force, but through tactical brilliance and the careful application of their strategic insights in the galaxy's ongoing battle for control.